Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. BC's dire drought and some of the people being hit the hardest.
This is the driest he's ever seen in 80 years of farming.
Why this could be the new norm. Plus, more money, more problems. What's behind some steep new fee hikes in the city of Vancouver? And a warning for displaced British Columbians venturing into fire zones and the problems facing patrol officers.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. We begin tonight with the fallout from the province's drought conditions. With strict water restrictions in place in many parts, some farmers are struggling to make ends meet. Yasmin Gandam has our top story and is looking at whether there's any sort of end in sight.
I haven't seen it like this. This is the driest he's ever seen in 80 years of farming.
Matthew Lady runs Brookfield Dairy Farm in Maple Ridge. The farm has been in his family since 1879, but if the province does not see enough rain, he is worried he won't be able to keep it up.
We're learning to adapt as we go, but there's only so far we can push things. And right now I feel we're kind of pushed to the limit. But you can see the grass is a bit ground and dry. They're happy to be out here eating.
Lady says farmers are all competing for the limited stock of hay right now, resorting to buying from across the border. Governments are calling the conditions catastrophic, unlike anything that's been seen before. The federal minister of emergency preparedness says work is being done to make sure policies are in place to support those hit hard by the ongoing drought.
Looking at the mitigation and the adaptation work. So that's an area that we will work together on this. The wider drought issue, I think, is going to have to take a look at a much wider issue when it comes to what type of new systems are going to be needed in place, what type of disaster that might also fall, and what type of consultations will be needed.
But this climate change expert says conditions aren't changing anytime soon.
The drought conditions this fall is more likely to actually continue all the way to mid-spring. And the reason being, there will be precipitation, but most of it falls mid to high elevation in the form of snow.
The province has seen sustained higher than average temperatures and low rainfall this year, leading to the worst wildfire season on record. While too much rain too quickly could cause the catastrophic flooding seen in winter of 2021, too little could extend the drought into the new year.
That wildfire has a double whammy, an effect on droughts because it exacerbates the droughts, because the landscape is actually now water repellent. The flood level that we used to experience once every 100 years, we're now experiencing them more frequently.
One step we would look to in the future was adding irrigation equipment.
For now, the only thing farmers like Lady can do is hope for some rain and relief. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Maple Ridge.
This year's wildfire season in Canada could last into late fall or early winter. That's the grim forecast today from Natural Resources Canada.
Indeed, despite the arrival of cooler night temperatures and decreases in lightning activity in the fall, ongoing warm and dry weather may contribute to new fire starts, and there remains a likelihood that some existing fires may continue to be active.
Wilkinson also announcing $65 million in federal funding for wildfire equipment and other supports. It's the first payment from a wildfire fund available to all provinces and territories. Ottawa plans to provide $256 million through to 2027. The Fraser Valley Regional District has confirmed more than 27 structures have been lost to a wildfire burning near Lytton. The Cookie Creek wildfire has been burning out of control along Highway 1 since midsummer. The 27 properties include 6 homes. The other structures were recreational properties and service buildings. The fire was discovered on July 8th and is believed to have been ignited by lightning, which resulted in evacuation alerts and orders, including the village of Lytton, which burned down 2 years ago. Meanwhile, in West Kelowna, a warning from the regional district to stay out of evacuation areas. The district says people are trying to sneak in by boat and via forestry roads into fire zones. RCMP checkpoints and patrols are in place, and people caught illegally in the area could see fines of more than $100. The evac order is in place until tomorrow, but could be extended further. Darius Madavi joins us now. Darius, obviously a lot of concern about drought throughout this province. Is there any sign of our traditional fall rain?
Unfortunately, not yet. We seem to be pretty dry across the province because we have a ridge of high pressure that is built in, and it looks like that's going to continue for quite a while. So if we take a look, a few spots where we might be seeing a bit of scattered precipitation right now, but as we head into the weekend for Friday and Saturday, just completely dry across the province except Haida Gwaii and a little bit in the Kootenays. And then as we head into later this weekend, just absolutely bone dry across the province. But if you notice this sort of band of moisture that's going to start to head over our way, and eventually by Sunday, it's going to hit the island and up on the coast, even the inland portions. Possibility that by early morning Monday, it could make its way to Vancouver, but it's very much up in the air right now, and the models have been flip-flopping a lot. But if we want to go deeper into the drought situation, yesterday we talked about how this the drought situation has update would come out today, and it has. We've only had one tiny little increase in the West Kootenays, decrease in drought level. But we also talked about how different this is from where we were at last year as we headed into what developed into a really historic and dangerous fall drought situation. So this is where we were at a similar time last year. You can notice we're much, much worse this year. And even at the peak of what was considered a historic and record-breaking fall drought, we were in a much better spot than we are even right now. Now, is that going to change as we head later into fall? That's the big question. Yesterday, we looked at this map that shows that released at the beginning of September, over the next 3 months, likely that southern BC is most likely to see drier conditions. But you might be asking, how reliable is this for the next 3 months? And the answer, let's take a look at where we were at last year. So last year, we were forecasted to be wetter in the north and pretty much normal in the south. But what we ended up seeing was a province-wide lack of rain. So it's really up in the air just what we're going to be seeing over the next 3 months, but we can only hope for the best with lots of rain to come.
All right, thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Well, fire crews scrambling in the last hour to a boat fire in False Creek. You can see here it appears to be one boat on fire attached to another, but one of them appearing to sustain serious damage. Fire Chief Karen Fry says that one of Vancouver's fire boats has been sent to help put it out. No word yet on any injuries or whether anyone might have been on board. We will have more at 11 o'clock and on our website. Well, police say the massive explosion in downtown Prince George that sent 3 people to hospital last month was because of a copper pipe thief. RCMP say several people broke into an abandoned restaurant on August 22nd. They say there was evidence the copper pipe theft caused damage to a natural gas line. The gas built up inside the building and was eventually ignited, causing the ground-shaking blast. The building was leveled and debris was scattered for blocks. Police say the thieves were unaware of the gas buildup inside the restaurant. So far, no arrests have been made. Well, the city of Vancouver is considering some steep new fee hikes for things like ride-hailing, parking permits, and business licenses. Essentially, it would add to the already high cost for residents here. Justin McElroy is live with us and following this story. Justin, a pretty wide range of proposed hikes. Can you break it all down?
Yeah, this is an interesting one, Anita, and it came from a council saying that they wanted to try and find ways to lower the property tax increases, which in Vancouver have gone from 2 or 3% over the last decade to 5, 6, 7. Last year, more than a 10% increase. And so they said, are there ways to raise revenues outside of property taxes that maybe we're not doing quite as much right now? And so staff came back, said, here are places that were lower in raising fees or charging than in other places in the Lower Mainland. And here's what they've come up with. So the short-term rental license fee, if you have something that you post on Airbnb, going from $109 a year to $450, a 25% increase for parking permits in areas where that's on-street parking permits right now, a regular business license going from $171 to $250 a year, as well as trade licenses going up, and also that ride-hailing fee. If you take an Uber and Lyft right now, 30 cents is charged to it right now, would be 45 cents next year and 60 cents the year after that. Now, 15, 30 cents may not seem like a lot for every ride, but add it all up, add all of these fees that the city of Vancouver is considering, and it would be enough to decrease the expected property tax increase by about 1.5% next year. So that's what's on the table with all of these, and it'll be an interesting discussion for council to decide what to do next.
Yeah, how likely is this to happen?
Well, it goes to council next week, but it won't be until the fall in which, during the budget, they will decide one way or the other on what to do. But they will give guidance to staff at next week's meeting. And I talked to councillors with all of the parties over the past few days, and it's shaping up to be an interesting conversation because there are splits and different disagreements, both in terms of what things they would like to see the fees increased on, what they think is fair, but also the question of whether fees or property taxes are the best ways to raise revenue in the city.
The annual surveys that go out to residents around 2024 budget consistently showed an overwhelming result in the positive, that people would prefer an increase in fees, user fees, that type of thing, over increase in property taxes. So this is the first time that we're really seeing a more targeted and focused approach to that.
It's a tough question. User fees tend to be more regressive than property taxes as a form of generating the funds to pay for our shared priorities. And it always needs to be a bit of a balance.
It certainly is a bit of a balance. And interesting there, you saw both of them not saying that either of these things were great or the worst in the world. Certainly nobody likes to up fees for residents, but the city of Vancouver has $2 billion a year in expenses. They have to be paid one way or the other.
Justin McElroy live tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, starting today, the Conservative Party is gathering in Quebec City for a 3-day policy convention. This is in the midst of party leader Pierre Poilievre riding high in public opinion polls. Experts say this trend could continue if the party treads lightly on social issues that could otherwise be off-putting to swing voters.
The Conservatives have a lot of wind in their sails right now. Pierre Poilievre has had a good summer. His standing in the polls has gone up while Justin Trudeau's has gone down. So for the party, they want to continue that momentum. They don't want anything to come up at this convention that derails the momentum that they have built up over the summer. And there are some potential pitfalls there, particularly LGBTQ rights, but probably some other social issues.
So as Kate McKenna reports, party leader Pierre Poilievre may be facing a tightrope act if some policy proposals become controversial and divisive.
Pierre Poilievre, le prochain Premier Ministre du Canada.
Pierre Poilievre received a warm welcome from a united caucus.
Conservatives will get back to the common sense of the common people.
The convention kicks off this evening, and the mood among the party faithful is good.
The response we're getting from voters under Pierre Poilievre's leadership, and which is such an exciting weekend for us, so we're very excited to be here.
It's always great to connect with constituents from across the country and to hear what they have to say.
This summer, Poilievre hammered the government on the cost of living. He's also seen a bump in polls, though Conservatives were quick to brush that off.
We don't look at polls, we just keep working.
But while his focus has been on pocketbook issues, his party wants to talk about social issues. Some proposed resolutions target vaccine mandates and diversity training. One proposes banning puberty blockers and surgery for transgender kids under 18.
I respect the rights and dignity of all Canadians, including members of the community. I also respect and have faith in the capacity of the Conservative Party membership to have respectful and compassionate debates.
Whatever resolutions do pass, they're not binding, but they could force Pierre Poilievre to walk a tightrope between keeping the party's base happy and appealing to a broader Canadian public. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Quebec City.
The city of Surrey says it is time to get rid of derelict boats it claims are illegally mooring in a picturesque river, and the city is bringing in the feds to help. The city says it will work with Transport Canada to remove the boats on the Nickelmeckle River in the south end of the city. It says they dump raw sewage and garbage into the water and gather salvage debris, creating hazards for other boaters. The mayor says the river has many spots where people can legally drop anchor. The cleanup in Surrey will begin sometime this month. And for 80 years, the pier at Jericho Beach has been a popular vantage point to take in the views of Burrard Inlet. But the Vancouver Park Board says it's time to dismantle it. The pier has been closed since early 2022 because of significant storm damage. Now, park staff have published a report saying it would cost too much to repair or replace it. The report says it's at the end of service and it risks more storm damage in the future with climate change. After the break, how wildfires spread and the degrees to which they destroy. We look into how wildfires grew in BC and beyond next. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. We're going to go to another story now in Yellowknife.
It's going to take some time before things are fully back up and running. Some essential workers, like healthcare workers and daycare workers, are already back, but most workers won't be allowed back in until noon tomorrow. Here's a rundown of some of the services that will be available tomorrow. Over at Stanton Hospital, the emergency department will be at almost normal capacity, but patients needing more complicated emergency care that would normally get that care here will be medevaced to southern hospitals after being stabilized. The intensive care, extended care, and psychiatric units will remain closed. The health department is telling evacuees who have medical travel appointments in Alberta before September 11th to not return home. I asked what support will be available for those folks, but have not got a response yet. Sutherland's Drugs has remained open through the evacuation. Shoppers Drug Mart and the Medicine Shop Pharmacy on Old Airport Road are also open with limited hours. Both the Co-op grocery store and the Uptown Independent grocer store will be open. The Co-op is open from 8 a.m. till 7 p.m. and the Uptown Independent is open from noon until 8 p.m. The Co-op gas bar is open from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. The chair of the Yellowknife Daycare Association says they're looking at being up and running by Monday, the same day students are now scheduled to return to school. Anyone hoping to go to the liquor store to get some cold beer after the long drive, you're out of luck. The manager of both liquor stores says they will not be open tomorrow, though they will try to open before the weekend. Richard Gleason, CBC News, Yellowknife.
from Lytton to Lahaina and West Kelowna. We've seen an increasing number of wildfires that travel so fast the people in their path have little warning and only moments to flee. Our Michelle Kassoub has been looking into the conditions that led to the most aggressive wildfire behavior and what can be done to prevent them.
The McDougall Creek fire that destroyed homes in West Kelowna seemed to come out of nowhere, forcing thousands to evacuate. It grew about 20 kilometers in just 12 hours. That's one of the fastest growing wildfires in BC's history. We've seen other destructive fires like this one that move with such speed, people had no choice but to flee. From Lytton, BC to Lahaina on Maui. So why do some fires go from spark to inferno so fast, and why do they seem to be getting worse? The McDougall Creek wildfire here in West Kelowna started as a spot fire. It was first discovered August 15th. And over a 24-hour period, it grew from 64 hectares to 68 square kilometers. The night of August 17th, people watched in horror as the fire barreled down the hill towards them, moving at incredible speeds.
When I say extreme, what it means is that they are moving faster than we can effectively put firefighting resources on them.
Every fire behaves differently, but there are specific conditions that determine how quickly they move and grow.
So when we talk about fire and fire behavior, we always talk about triangles. So topography, fuels, and weather. And so there's combinations of topography, fuels, and weather that kind of lead to sometimes to aggressive fire behavior.
Let's start with perhaps the most important factor in all these fires, weather and often powerful winds. In West Kelowna, wind gusts pushed the fire aggressively towards town, even causing it to jump Lake Okanagan.
You could see it moving quite quickly, and then when it started coming down the hill, I mean, with the winds kind of pushing it, that's what sort of allowed it to come down. But we saw aggressive fire behavior, and this is where, you know, the fire itself starts to exhibit some influence on what you're seeing. When a fire starts to generate a lot of energy and a lot of heat, it's actually going to generate wind that pulls the fire along. We had really, really high wind speeds that day, so 50 to 70 kilometers an hour or higher with gusts. And when you get these large, aggressive fires with these big convective columns, what's happening is you have a lot of ember transport and the transport of other materials like pine cones, branches, twigs, other sorts of materials that are picked up by that fire into the smoke column or in the wind and then carried long distances. And so what we saw in Kelowna on August 17th with those wind speeds was ember transport across the lake, which, you know, is maybe a kilometer or two wide where it jumped the lake. And so those embers and those materials got into the fuels on the other side of the lake and started the fires that we saw in Lake Country and on the Kelowna side versus West Kelowna.
We now know that in Lahaina, the fire that destroyed the town was exacerbated by strong easterly trade winds whipped up by Hurricane Dora. That fire grew by a mile a minute. That's as fast as a car driving on a highway.
Wind is everything. It's really that last piece of the puzzle because it fuels oxygen to the fire. So just the same way as if you had a campfire and you're getting down to blow on the embers to really start that fire, the wind acts as that really driving force behind fires.
Next up in our fire triangle is topography. Fires can move very fast uphill. Heat rises, preheating fuels that are further up on a slope, igniting them quickly once the fire reaches them.
Fires really like to move up steep slopes, but in the case of the West Kelowna wildfires, we saw the fire actually moving downslope, and I think that really had to do from the winds pushing at that fire's back down the slope. But we also were experiencing some issues of probably rolling debris and embers rolling down that slope and creating small spot fires underneath, which were then burning up and connecting to that main fire source.
Topography played a huge role in the destruction of Lytton. The village sits inside a canyon. The day of the fires, temperatures soared to 49.5 degrees Celsius. High winds raced down into Lytton, acting like a blowtorch on the landscape. All it took was a spark for almost the entire village to go up in flames.
Coming this way, fast! Let's get out of here.
The Lytton fire station camera caught one last image of the fire heading into town just before a majority of the village was destroyed. The last piece of the fire triangle is fuel. Lytton, Lahaina, and West Kelowna all experienced sustained droughts before these fires struck. So there was lots of dry material from trees to shrubs, grass, and pine cones ready to burn. One thing we can control is the amount of available fuel. Doing more prescribed burns can get rid of dry material that can burn.
So our treatments need to be on the scale of the fires that we're seeing. So if we're seeing 5,000 hectare fires, and some of our treatments should be 5,000 hectares or more. So it's that pattern that we need to create across the landscape, and we just need to do a lot more of it. And we don't have forever. The way things are changing quite rapidly with climate change and the creation of more fuels and the accumulation of more fuels is we have a limited window.
The people who have fought and studied fires worry these kinds of aggressive wildfires are becoming more severe and more frequent because our climate is changing. When topography, fuel, and weather come together, fires can get so dangerous, even firefighters may be forced to retreat.
To be honest, sometimes it just becomes too dangerous to actually have personnel on that type of fire where you're seeing that kind of fire behavior. And as a wildland firefighter, those are the ones where we start talking about making sure you have an escape route, making sure you have a way to get out of the fire into a safety zone in case you had to get away from that fire. When I was a wildland firefighter, it seems like fires are different. They're more aggressive, and it's becoming a more dangerous sort of thing sometimes to action some of these fires. And so I think there's an urgency with that if we're going to live with these type of fires on the landscape, how do we do that?
The McDougall Creek fire destroyed or damaged almost 170 structures. In Lytton, an entire village was lost and 2 elderly people died. In Lahaina, the death toll is 115 people, and many more are still missing. Fast-moving fires are dangerous to the people who live on these landscapes. As our climate changes and as fires like these become more common, the ways we mitigate and fight them will have to adapt too.
The CBC's Michelle Gassoub reporting tonight from West Kelowna. If you'd like to track climate change both here in Vancouver and around the world, you can go to our climate dashboard. That's at cbc.ca/climate. A joint naval exercise in international waters and a Canadian warship confronted by a Chinese naval vessel. The CBC was on board. That's next.
Oh, we'll try to stop them any way we can, yeah.
And how would you do that?
Well, I suppose we just have to finally try to physically stop them.
So the people in town are pretty upset.
Yeah, I'd say they're extremely angry at this time.
This development of a shops, offices and pub complex in Steveston got the green light from Richmond Council last night, but the proposal was bitterly contested.
Our proposal was supported by many people in Steveston and throughout Richmond.
Richmond Mayor Gil Blair called the police when hecklers tried to disrupt the vote.
I'm having a recess while we call the police.
You're calling the police?
Police.
Calm was restored without the police having to act, and council approved the development along party lines. Today there were allegations that the agenda was rigged to stifle debate.
Of course, the way it was handled last night was absolutely deplorable. It was definitely railroaded through and it was definitely engineered.
Fishermen and merchants say the new complex will ruin the character of the area, already under pressure from expanding housing developments. And they say the developers have been unduly favoured by Federal Fisheries Minister Tom Siddon, the local MP.
If you look at the consistent voting of the municipality here as far as the REVA-sponsored groups are concerned, and where they sit federally, and provincially too for that matter, but they nearly all are part of the team that elected Tom Siddon in the first place.
I think the whole thing has been engineered from day one.
Developer Larry Bigger will lease the land from the Small Craft and Harbours branch of Siddon's department, but he denies charges of favouritism.
That suggestion somewhat upsets me, and I think it's an insult.
So you didn't actually do any financing of Mr. Siddon's campaign,
absolutely not.
But you did assist the campaign?
In a working sense, yeah.
Like it or not, and there are plenty of people here who don't like it, Steveston has developed enormously over the years anyway. But up until now, that has always been on the land. And now, the developers have reached the last bastion of the good old days, the waterfront. Ian Gill, CBC News, Steveston.
The federal government has named a Quebec judge to head a public inquiry into foreign interference in Canadian elections. As Rafi Boudjikanian tells us, she will preside over the independent investigation looking at alleged meddling in the 2019 and 2021 federal elections.
After months of putting it off, the government's agreed to a public inquiry into foreign interference.
We have arrived with the full support of the opposition at the best person to lead this inquiry.
That will be Quebec Court of Appeal Judge Marie-Josée Hogg, tasked with looking into foreign interference by China, Russia, and other state and non-state actors during the federal elections in 2019 and 2021.
We arrived not at a consensus, but at a unanimous agreement on all of those details.
But the opposition had been asking for a public inquiry since last winter, following multiple news stories leaning on anonymous national security sources and leaked documents. They alleged Beijing attempted to interfere in the last two federal elections to favor victories for Liberal MPs over the return of Conservatives to power. The Liberals punted the decision over an inquiry to Special Rapporteur David Johnston, who wound up resigning after recommending against one.
Justin Trudeau's tried to do everything to avoid this.
The Conservatives had been leading the charge against Johnston, accusing him of being too close to Justin Trudeau's family. They're showing more cooperation for now.
We accept the nomination of Justice Hogg, and we will continue to not just push for the government to be open and transparent and provide all the documents and waive all the cabinet confidences that may be required.
National security experts say she'll have her work cut out for her.
The mandate being given to the commissioner is a pretty broad one, and I hope that the first thing that she does is to prepare a fairly comprehensive inventory of what's happened, not only directly on the elections, but on what's happened between elections.
All this with tight timelines. Hogg is expected to produce an interim report by the end of next February and a final one by the end of next year. She officially starts her job in less than 2 weeks. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
An Ontario man allegedly linked to more than 110 deaths worldwide is due back in court tomorrow. And tonight, the mother of one of his suspected victims is speaking out for the first time. Thomas Dagla has her son's story and how she's pushing for better mental health services.
Kim Prosser has spent hours on the shores of Lake Erie, trying to heal since the death of her son Ashton last March. He was a month away from his 20th birthday.
It was like all of this potential it's just gone.
She's the first parent to speak publicly about a loved one's suicide that prosecutors blame on Kenneth Law. Accused of selling a potentially lethal substance online, Law is facing 14 charges of counseling or aiding suicide in Ontario. Kim suspects Ashton found a pro-suicide forum that led him to Law, when what her son really needed was help.
We're not doing enough. There isn't support for everyone who's struggling in mental health.
She says Ashton's mental health declined when his high school classes went virtual early in the pandemic. Around the world, families are speaking of their late loved one's struggles, with Law suspected of links to more than 110 deaths in multiple countries.
He's destroyed lives, so many lives. Depression.
Imogen Nunn was known to her TikTok followers as Deaf Immy, raising awareness about the deaf community and mental health until she took her own life this year.
It was really difficult to get access to deaf mental health services.
Law was arrested near Toronto in May. Now police in BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan all say they're investigating. Law sent 160 packages across Canada, allegedly marketing products to vulnerable clients.
To see someone who might be promoting or talking about suicide as a way to feel better is really hard to watch.
As for Prosser, she plans to start a foundation in her son's memory, knowing those who need support aren't always getting it. Those tattoos symbolize her family and were drawn by Ashton, a part of him she'll keep forever. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
Help is available if you or someone you know is struggling. You can call Talk Suicide Canada at 1-833-456-4566 or text 45645 between 7 p.m. and 3 a.m. Pacific. Residents of Yellowknife continue to make their way home today. This as nearly 200 fires continue to burn across the Northwest Territories. As Aaron Collins explains, before those fires are even out, thoughts are turning to what to do about the next ones.
Thousands of Yellowknifers continue to trickle back into the city, weeks on the road coming to an end for many residents forced to evacuate the capital. The first stop for many returning to the city, the grocery store. Filling fridges and cupboards key for most. Local stores deemed essential services working hard to get their shelves stocked.
If you can't find something today, I'm sure we'll have it tomorrow or the next day.
Officials say most of the other key services in the city have been restored. Water and power is flowing. The city's airport and hospital are also up and running, although there are some limitations there.
Our ICU is closed, our pediatrics unit is closed, and I think of interest for many people, our labor and delivery unit remains closed.
While residents return to the capital, dozens of fires continue to burn across the territory, preventing other people from heading home.
And our singular objective is to help those folks get home safe and reduce that wildfire risk.
The hope is that a plan to return people to the town of Hay River could be released soon. When that plan will actually come into effect, well, that's still unknown. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Yellowknife.
To a CBC News exclusive now, a Canadian Navy warship has had at least 3 encounters with Chinese ships in the waters off Japan, the most significant during an exercise in international waters. Now, the incidents were peaceful, but they also hint at ongoing tensions in the contested waters. David Coleman has exclusive access from aboard HMCS Ottawa.
China's Navy has grown increasingly assertive on the high seas, especially around Taiwan, but rarely do we get to see it like this.
This is Chinese warship 161. Keep a safe distance with me.
We have exclusive access on this Canadian Navy vessel as it's conducting exercises with the U.S. and Japanese navies when this Chinese warship appears. This is what China pushing back against other powers looks like. It brings a risk of collision and the opportunity to gaze at an adversary. Commander Sam Patchell is the captain of this ship.
We're not even in the Taiwan Strait. We're not in contested waters, and there's a Chinese warship right there.
They're operating near the waters, their own waters, and we're just operating in this open ocean. They're as curious about, I think, our behavior as we are of theirs.
This one encounter is an example of how China is seeking greater influence and control of the waters around its neighbors, sending what is now the world's largest navy further from its shores, sometimes dangerously so, like this at-sea close call in June, when a Chinese warship cut off an American naval vessel crossing the Taiwan Strait.
China's basically trying to exert the same types of controls that companies do over national waterways. And if they can't do that, to harass other people that are going through those areas and make it uncomfortable for people to exercise the right of free passage on the open ocean.
Unloaded, ready to fire.
It means Canada's Navy may not expect a fight, but it is prepared for one.
All 3 nations here believe in a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Just as the U.S., Japan, and Canada line up their ships to take a picture, the Chinese warship is still there on the edge, parallel to their adversaries. Then, following the Canadians on their onward journey, a shadow on the seas.
Coming up, Canada's glaciers in peril. We take you to the Rockies, where one is disappearing and signaling a changing landscape. That's next.
Hey, I'm Johanna Wagstaff.
And hi there, I'm Rohit Joseph.
And we're asking for 10 minutes of your day to go through the 10 things that the UN recommends we can all do when it comes to climate change.
Please don't leave.
No.
And also, the things aren't new.
We are just wired to not do them.
We promise you to help you figure out your brains, and you and your people can make better choices to combat climate change.
10 Minutes to Save the Planet is available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
A glacier in the Rockies is heading rapidly into oblivion. The Peyto Glacier was selected by the UN in 1968 for scientific monitoring, but as of 2 years ago, an estimated 70% of it was gone. The CBC's Dan McGarvey headed to the glacier to see how much has retreated.
I just need to see
A team of researchers from the University of Saskatchewan takes to the skies over Banff National Park, high above remote mountain tops and pristine lakes, to glaciers and ice fields, and one that's disappearing faster than even they expected.
Well, dramatic change since last year, which itself had been dramatic change from the year before. This is the final end of our ice age. It's happening right now in our lifetimes.
For decades, Peyto Glacier's been a global reference point for scientists who measure the ice's thickness and its retreat. They say this year is on track to be one of the worst they've seen, adding to an already historic melt-off in 2021.
Normally the glacier would retreat 20 to 30 meters per year. It retreated almost 300 meters in 1 year after that. It's very challenging to see it disappear like this.
And then add 360 millimeters.
There's now a snowball effect of factors that could see this glacier and others disappear in our lifetimes. Peyto Glacier would usually have fresh snow on it at this time of year, but it's already melted, and without that fresh snow, it can't make the ice it needs to survive.
It gets into this death spiral of when we have this kind of heat, the heat itself melting things, and then the soot from the fire darkening the glacier, causing it to melt faster.
Other scientists who also study the glacier say that means it's getting much harder to monitor as it melts and collapses.
It's getting more and more difficult to access the glacier to do our field work. We're also seeing new crevasses open up in new places, as well as holes and parts of the glacier actually falling apart.
Eventually, scientists will move on from Peyto to study glaciers that aren't melting as quickly, leaving this landscape to change forever. Dan McGarvey, CBC News, Banff, Alberta.
Now let's take a look at some of the cities across the world currently feeling the effects of climate change. This is Hong Kong, which today was hit by a sudden deluge of heavy rainfall, resulting in widespread flooding that transformed streets into rivers and submerged dozens of vehicles. The Hong Kong Observatory attributed the rainfall to the remnants of Typhoon Haikui, which made landfall early on Tuesday. The observatory recorded an hourly rainfall rate of more than 158 millimeters, marking the highest hourly level recorded there since the year 1884. And in Greece, at least 6 people have died after Storm Daniel swept across the central part of the country, triggering landslides, destroying roads and bridges, and carrying away dozens of cars. Since Tuesday, at least 820 people have been forced from their homes. Authorities say it's the most extreme rainfall the country has ever received since they started keeping those records. And rains in Brazil's far south have left nearly 40 people dead. Officials say the heavy rains caused by a tropical cyclone have affected 80 cities and left thousands homeless. The floods in the south are just the latest natural disasters in Brazil. Earlier this year, more than 50 people were killed in Sao Paulo state after massive downpours caused landslides and flooding. Time now to check in again with Darius Madavi. No rain like that, thankfully, here for us. But what is in the long term?
Well, it looks like we'll go over the next few days to start because we're heading into the weekend soon. For tomorrow, temperatures have come up a little bit more as we have that dry spell settle in across the province. So in the south, expect temperatures in the mid to high 20s over the next couple days. On the coast, we'll be sticking around 20. So pretty nice as we head into the first weekend back from school. As we head into Saturday, this is going to be our hottest day for the near future. Lytton getting up to 30, high 20s down here. And then as we head into Sunday, this is when on the coast, once this loads in, our temperatures come back down. Whereas or maybe it won't load back in the interior, we're staying around the high 20s as we see some cooling happen for the coast. So that's when our possibility of rain might move in that we looked at earlier. We saw possible for Victoria and Vancouver, but almost certain for higher up, further north on the island. So the North Island and the North Coast probably going to see that rain. Meanwhile, we don't really have much rain to speak of today. We saw that it's looking pretty bone dry. There's little residual showers that are still happening in central BC are going to clear up pretty soon. So I'd expect, you know, a very nice weekend to get out and go spend some last time on the beach before we really start to feel the effects of fall. Even if we don't get some rain in the forecast, we should see temperatures come down as we head into the next few weeks. Meanwhile, we have these smoke conditions pretty bad in central and northern BC, but looking pretty good in the south still, a bit smokier than we were the last few days in places like Kelowna. I know they had some really clear skies today. I was talking to our reporter Brady out in Kelowna, and he was saying that it's pretty nice skies right now, but it looks like conditions will get a little bit worse as we head into tomorrow. Meanwhile, tonight we have some pretty seasonal lows, not looking anything out of the ordinary. We've got some of that cloud clearing up as we head into tomorrow. You can see that when we look at tomorrow's forecast, all that cloud has gone as we see really clear conditions across the province. And here in Vancouver, we're seeing a pretty nice start to the weekend. It's not until Sunday we see showers possible, mostly overnight between Sunday and Monday. Possibility that those continue into Monday morning, but it's not too likely. So I'd say just get out and enjoy the sunshine this weekend.
Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Well, Canada is experiencing shorter and less severe winters because of climate change, but warmer weather also brings with it more bugs, many that carry infectious disease. Now, as Lauren Pelly explains, a Toronto mother is warning Canadians to be on alert for insect-borne infections after her young son fell severely ill.
Mom's right here. Hi, buddy. It's okay.
Catherine McKissick's son Cameron spent a month in a Toronto hospital suffering from dangerous brain inflammation. Lab reports later showed the 6-year-old was infected with Jamestown Canyon virus. It's a rare but rising threat spread across North America by mosquitoes, and one his mom had never heard of.
How do you protect your child from a mosquito?
The family didn't travel this summer, so she assumes her son was bitten right in their own community. McKissock now worries more Canadians could be at risk.
I'm really hoping that they start testing for these things and they start watching for it and studying it a little bit closer.
We actually don't really know how much of these infections are here, and there certainly is a major knowledge gap.
This doctor warns limited testing and awareness means many cases of insect-transmitted infections could be underreported, even though climate change is fueling their spread.
We're seeing, shorter winters that aren't as cold, and basically the expansion of insects that can transmit these infections.
West Nile and Lyme disease are two of the big ones. Once rare in Canada, thousands of cases have been reported in recent years. Surveillance is also ramping up for other diseases. Ontario just began tracking 3 more tick pathogens this summer, all of which can make humans sick. But the province didn't provide any data. CBC News reached out to every regional health unit and found there could be dozens of possible cases already under investigation.
Of course, it starts out that way, and then, what it'll look like 5 years from now, we can only imagine.
Other leg. McKissick's family now uses bug spray, one of the few tools she has to try and keep her kids safe. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Oshawa, Ontario.
When the Montreal Expos left town, some thought that was the end for baseball in Quebec. Now, nearly 20 years later, the sport is booming. We'll tell you why and meet some passionate new players next.
Some Summerside residents say this intersection needs to change. Those living along Greenwood Drive and Pope Road say the traffic is sometimes heavy and people are confused as to who has the right of way.
Well, it's a concern for all residents, really. It's hard getting out of Greenwood onto Pope or even just across Pope. There's 2 lanes now, but it made it even more difficult.
Cameron says sometimes people going straight cut off the line of view for those trying to make a left. Some don't know what the solution is, but they have some suggestions.
As far as lights go, that might be an answer. I know there's lights coming out of the Lafergie subdivision on the eastern part of Summerside, and that works well.
Four-way traffic lights would be great. People coming up from Greenwood Drive, turning on to Pope Road, have an awful time seeing which way they're going to be to get out there on the highway. Like, it's not safe.
There are flags for people to use to make crossing safer, and there is a button to turn lights on to warn drivers of pedestrians crossing, but there are still issues.
My wife was putting her hit there walking the dog. Yeah. Not too long ago, a year ago maybe.
The councillor for the area has received about 100 complaints about the intersection. He says left turning lanes were added to the area, but many tell him things haven't improved. The city says it would cost about $125,000 to install lights, but it's not clear when something will be done.
It's a lot easier to get something done if it's recommended by staff. So if there's another study done based on increased volume or flow of traffic, and if those numbers say, yeah, you know what, we actually recommend installing the lights at this intersection, that's certainly an easier sell to council. It's a big budget item, so it's a lot more difficult than just saying, we want to do it.
Residents I spoke with say they want something done sooner rather than later. Many said they would prefer a set of lights be installed before somebody gets hurt trying to cross the street. Tony Davis, CBC News, Summerside.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
September is Literacy Month. Have fun and support the cause by joining CBC Vancouver's Dan Burrett at Dakota's Team Trivia Challenge on September 27th. For tickets, register at dakota.ca. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
It's been nearly 20 years since the Montreal Expos played their last game in La Belle province. And for a while, baseball's hold on the city waned. But now, as Jay Turnbull explains, the game is back and growing in popularity.
A typical summer night in NDG. A couple of dozen kids battling it out on the diamond, a crowd of fans gathering to watch. It's how communities are built.
It's such a wonderful game. It's a game that really grabs you in the heart, and tugs those heartstrings. And, there's something about the sights and the smells and the sounds of the game of baseball that's like no other game.
On this night, the Dollard Expos beat the NDG Lynx in the boys 11U A division. The real winner this summer, though, is the sport itself. Across the province, more kids than ever before are picking up a bat. According to Baseball Quebec, since 2014, the number of players registered grew nearly 50% to more than 37,000. It's a tense game here between the Pierrefonds Expos and the NDG Bobcats. You're seeing more and more of this in Montreal, more kids playing baseball, and especially like this game here, more girls have signed up. Baseball Quebec says there are nearly 5,500 girls playing the sport now, up from fewer than 1,900 in 2014, a whopping 191% increase. To find out why, I asked one of the game's future stars. Hi, Mia.
Hi.
I'm Jay.
I'm Mia.
Want to play catch?
Sure.
Okay, let's go. Mia Fine is 9 years old. She's a heck of a first basewoman for the Pierrefonds Expos. She loves the sport.
So I started when I saw my sister playing baseball.
Do you watch much baseball on TV?
Yeah.
You watch baseball on TV? Who's your favorite team?
Blue Jays.
Uh-oh. I thought it was against the rules for someone from Montreal to like anything from Toronto.
Really?
And who's your favorite player on the Blue Jays?
Guerrero.
Guerrero, of course.
It's a family affair. Mia's mom is the coach.
It's a just great value asset in their life. It teaches them friendship, leadership, trust, play as a team, and it builds their self-confidence on the field. You know, it's not just boys who can play ball. Girls are very good at ball.
Espinoza says interest in the sport is booming in Pierrefonds to the point where kids are being put on waiting lists.
It's non-stop. We have waiting lists, but no players left behind. We always find them a spot somewhere to play somehow.
Go, go, go! The sport is exploding in NDG as well. This summer, for the first time ever, the association opened up an all-girls category.
In the past, NDG baseball had somewhere between 10 or 15 girls every year, and they played co-ed. This year with Baseball Quebec, we were able to create the what we called the Bobcats, NDG Bobcats girls baseball program. And in year one, we went from about 15 girls in our association to almost 80. For me, the future is really female when it comes to the growth of baseball and sports in general. And we have a huge opportunity to get more and more girls playing, and that's really part of our mission.
Seidel says he's watched his own daughters flourish on an all-girls team. Layla Grintuck spent last year playing on a co-ed team. She didn't mind playing with boys, but she has a preference.
So if you had the choice, would it be all girls or all boys, or what would you want?
All girls.
Okay, why?
I just feel like I'm more with like girls, and like when I'm with boys, I'm just like basically with boys. There's only going to be like 2 or 1 girl on my team.
Okay, so is it easier to make friends on an all-girls team?
Yeah.
The renewed love of the sport in this province has made Quebec a baseball powerhouse. Quebec teams, boys and girls, won 10 medals in national tournaments this year. Jay Turnbull, CBC News, Montreal.
Awesome stuff. And girls, women in sports in Canada has taken off. And you know what? It's growing in popularity for sports that weren't necessarily popular before. So glad to see this. Thanks for watching CBC Vancouver News. We'll see you tomorrow.